Today is September 2nd, 2003. This is an interview with Mr. Fred Lewis King. Oh, sorry. Today is September the 2nd, 2003. This is an interview with Mr. Fred Lewis King. Birth date is 5/13/22. His wife is in attendance and Robert Gardner is conducting the interview. Mr. King, what war and branch of service did you serve in?
World War II in the infantry.
And what was your rank, sir?
Well, while I was overseas and combat and everything, I was just plain old private. And now, later on, I got stripes as sergeant.
Were you drafted or did you enlist?
I enlisted.
Where were you living at the time, sir?
Well, I lived in Earlene, Tennessee. It's where I was born and raised. And at the time, I started in college in August. And so I went down to Knoxville, Tennessee, 100 miles, and enlisted. So he told me to go back to school, and he would call me when we were ready for him.
Why did you join, sir?
Well, it was just after Pearl Harbor, that was just a thing to do. We're in war, so we all joined.
You mentioned Pearl Harbor. How did you find out about that?
Well, I went to church on that morning, and I was dating the doctor's daughter. He invited me to lunch that day, and we had the radio on, and all of a sudden here started this news about Pearl Harbor. We didn't believe it, so we sat there and listened to it all afternoon.
Why did you pick the service branch that you joined?
Well, really, I wanted to get in the ground crew of the Air Force because I'm pretty good with my hands, and I wanted to work on the motors. But they said, hey, no, need you in the infantry, so that's where I went.
Do you recall your first days in the service?
Oh, yes. From the college, we got on a train, went to Chattanooga, to Fort Belvoir. I was there first 2-3 days, and they gave us our uniforms and all of this. And then they sent me down to Atlanta, Georgia, to a new camp that they had there. There was an infantry camp, so my first day there was pretty wild.
What did it feel like?
Well, you really didn't know. Excitement, I guess. And here's all these thousands of people going in the service, and you just went with the flow of the crowd and tried not to let it bother you.
Can you tell me anything about your boot camp or training experiences?
Oh yes, boot camps at Camp Quiglers. I said, on Naples. It's an infantry camp and engineering. I was there about 8 months, and I was in company. I forgot what company I was in there. We had about half of them from Brooklyn, New York. Never been out of Brooklyn before in their life. We had a lot of fun with it. And the short while that I was in college, I knew I was going into service. So I went out every day on the track field and run a half mile, and we had an Army group there in the college, so they had the wall that you go over and all those things. So I did all of it. So when I went into service, I was in great shape. And I'm telling things on I shouldn't say, but these poor boys from Brooklyn, never been out for one in their life. In Atlanta, Georgia, down in Macon, Georgia, in the middle of the summer, we'd go on a 7-mile hike. Every one of them would fall out. But I kept going.
Do you remember any of your instructors?
Well, the first day the sergeant got in there and he told you, he said, now you're here and I'm the sergeant, I'm the boss. If anybody wants to say something about that, step out right now. He says, I'll tell you what to do and I want you to do it. Actually, he was a good fellow. But so we went out and we started learning how to march and turn and this type stuff. And they gave us a rifle and we went on the rifle range and tried to shoot the best that you could. And you just might have an all-night hike you go on and all these different things. And you just flowed with it. And some people think I'm crazy. I enjoyed it. I was in good shape. And I knew I was going somewhere, but the training I didn't mind.
So how did you get through it?
Well, I got through it in great shape. In other words, when it was over with, I was in good shape, and I said, okay, and they let me have a week's visit at home, and then sent me up to a camp up on the other side of Washington, and then took me down to Newport News and put me on a ship.
What war did you serve in, sir?
World War II, and most of my duty was in Italy.
Do you remember arriving and what it was like?
Well, arriving in Italy, of course, the troops at my outfit, I went over as a replacement, of course, so I put me in an outfit of 45th Division in Oklahoma, and we landed in southern Italy and had to drive the Germans, because they'd already been in Sicily, and African Sicily the outfit had, and the Germans were waiting on us, and they almost drove us back off, but finally we were able to push them back and start up the peninsula.
What was your job or assignment?
Well, I was just an infantryman, and so I was to shoot, travel, shoot, do whatever they told you. They said, let's go, we go, let's capture this house, or let's push them out of there. So I did what I was told.
So obviously you saw combat.
Oh, yes.
Were there many casualties in your unit?
Many casualties. My company, you're having about an average of 115 men in it. And we say they were wiped out. They were wiped out 3 times. One time down we had 20, and the next time down we had 7. So I'm lucky.
Can you tell me about a couple of your most memorable experiences?
Well, the German, of course, I'll bring it up at your beachhead. We had the beachhead, and it was shaped like a half moon, and the Germans came, were going to drive us off the beachhead. So they made the big drive, and the first morning they came in, they did the artillery like they're supposed to do, and the tanks were coming in. Here I was in a foxhole, and the Germans went by me. They didn't see me, but the tank stopped right there over my foxhole with the end of the barrel just right above me. And so from about daylight to about 4 o'clock in the afternoon, I laid there in that foxhole and watched them. Some people say they're crazy, but I could actually, after the middle of the day, I don't remember I actually saw the shell, but I could see the movement of the shell out of the barrel. Of course, our artillery was trying to get out the tank, and one of the shells landed right near me, made a hole big enough to put a Jeep in, picked me up, the cushion did, threw me out 6 or 8 yards. I crawled back in, the tank still didn't know I was there. So they, about dusk, they pulled back to a house about 150 yards from us. They got out and having a big time, so when it got dark, I got out and went to the man next to me, and I said, hey, let's go and tell them that the tank's down here. And we went, we couldn't find them. They had withdrawn that morning, they couldn't get to us. Of course, I didn't know it at the time, but there was, in a company, you had 2 platoons of infantry, and one of our machine gun, and the other heavy equipment they have. Well, I didn't know at the time that the other platoon was either killed or captured. The heavy weapons platoon was either killed or captured, and there was about 20 of us left when I finally got back through the line.
Were you awarded any medals or citations, sir?
Well, I got the Purple Heart and Bronze Star.
Can you tell me about your Purple Heart?
Well, while after the Germans decided they couldn't push us off the beachhead, we were just fighting to take a house or something like this. My group was back in the reserve, because they always have to have reserve behind troops, and we got orders, hey, the G Company's about to be wiped out, let's go. So we just got our rifles, started running across this big field with all the shells landing around us. Something told me to hit the ground. Just as I hit the ground, the shell exploded in front of me, and one piece about the size of a silver dollar went through my helmet and lodged in my head. A small piece went through my jaw, and I was paralyzed. Shell struck the way going to call. I couldn't, concussion. Maybe I couldn't even move my eyes, I couldn't move my hands, I couldn't do anything. And, sorry.
Okay. Can we put it on hold?
I'm all right. One of the men came over to look at me. He thought I was dead. He saw the hole in the helmet, and my eyes wouldn't open, so he left. So I don't know where, 2, 3, 4 hours or what. Finally, my energy came back, and I crawled over to the ditch because I knew there was a aid station back about a mile, and went back there, and he cleaned up my head, my jaw, and gave me something to make me sleep. So the next morning, I picked up my rifle and went back to the front.
Did you have any other injuries, sir?
No energy. Well, of course, I get trench feet later on. Of course, I had hit my speed, but trench feet is when when I went over, we had shoes just like I have on, with leggings. Of course, there's no waterproofing there. Later on, when they were coming on the beachhead, the GIs had boots that were waterproof. Well, my feet stayed wet all the time. My socks stayed wet all that time. So eventually, it developed into trench feet. And I got up to the city limits of Rome. Went to sick call, and he said, "Fred, I can't believe this." He bandaged it up and sent me back to the hospital on Angelo Beachhead, which is about 25 miles away. So I spent there on the beachhead hospital, and they took me by hospital ship back to Naples. Put me in a hospital there, and I spent about 2.5 months there. Then they sent me back to the United States, and I spent 4.5 months in the hospital there. Eventually got over it. They wanted to take off one of my feet. I talked about it.
Where was the hospital at that they sent you to here in the United States?
Well, when we landed, it was Newport News, Virginia, and in Richmond they just opened a new veterans home. We were the first group to get there. Boy, they treated us like a king. Yeah, they really treated us every way. And then they sent me to, since that's in Tennessee, they sent me to the hospital in Nashville. Well, they didn't know anything about trench feet there. So then they sent me to White Sulphur Springs, West Virginia, to Greenbrier, which was a hotel. It was converted into a hospital. And I spent 4.5 months there, and they worked on my feet, trying to get it was like a block of ice from my legs down to my ankles. And they were trying to get some feeling in it, and went through several experiments. And then they discharged me, and I went on back up service.
When you went back, where did they send you to?
Well, they sent me to Fort Belvoir outside of Washington, D.C. They didn't know what to do with me. And of course, I was a walking patient and everything, and I got through it. But then a lieutenant came and interviewed me. And the next day, I went over to the finance office, or bank, as you call it, on the base. And it was a place where they fixed all the payrolls for all the companies in that camp. And we had people there that would go over the payroll. If somebody had been made a sergeant, they put the price on there. And then once a month, then two days before the payroll, here come MPs with machine guns, and they'd bring money and put it in a vault. And the next day, they put out all the money on the table. They put all the $20 in stacks, put the $10 in stacks, 5, right on down. And I sit down in the chair just looking at all that money. People said, "What are you doing? They laughed at me." I said, "It's the first time I've ever seen $500,000. I didn't know there was that much money in the world." So the next day, now the people we had working there on each company, brochure things that they had, they put how many $20 bills they needed, how many tens they needed, right on down. So the lieutenant would count out the $20 bills that need to go in that company. Sergeant counted, somebody else counted. They handed me the money, and I put it in the bag. And they did that with every one of them. And then I took a thread with a big tag on it for Company F and put it in the vault. So we did that all day long. I got to handle $500,000 in a day's time. So I did work there, they worked me, but I enjoyed it. It's the best duty I have, been there for 11 months.
Do you have any other combat experiences that you had when you were in Italy that you'd like to talk about?
Yes, I've had several of them. Of course, I told you about the tank and told you about my here. And this is a fun one. I get a big, people get a big kick out of it. I didn't think it was so funny at the time. We were pulled back in reserve, what was left of us, only about 30 or 40 of us left in the country, but they said the British engineers in the place they were practically wiped out and they need to come back so they could be reinforced, and they wanted us to replace them. But in order to get there, we had to go across an open field, and with the Germans sitting there on the mountain, we didn't do that in the daytime. So we stood in a little wooded area all day long, just pouring down the rain. Couldn't even sit on the ground, we just stood there. That night we went up, relieved the British, and it'd been raining, and the foxholes, of course, were just full of water. And I'd had enough, I wasn't going to sleep in water. Right next to me was a big pile of hay. And we usually didn't get near hay fields because the Germans would think tanks and things like that, but I didn't care that night. It stopped raining. So I pulled out a big thing of straw and then pulled out a lot on top of me. And believe it or not, I went to sleep. I don't know how long I laid there, but out in no man's land, which was about 200 yards from us, near the line, there was these animals. There was horses, there was cows, there was sheep, all you could think about, and oxen. Just when a shell had landed one place, they run down here, and landed another place and run down here. Well, one of the oxen came over, and he weighed about 1,500 pounds. He took a note and he liked that pile of straw, so he laid down on it. Next thing I knew, there was so much weight on my body, I couldn't figure out what it was. Got my eyes open. Here was his tail right in my face. And I beat on his side, the couple gun and everything was under me. I couldn't stick him. I beat on him, he just turned around and looked at me. And my buddy on the other side of me, he came over. I said, help me. He said, you got it, you get out. So he went back. Luckily, a shell landed close, and he got up and took off. So I was black and blue for a long time. At the time, I didn't think it was funny. But wouldn't it have been something else if my mother had gotten an email or something saying your son was wounded in combat by a cow? And it's a true story. I can prove it. Wasn't funny at the time, but it is now. So let's see, I was trying to think of some of the other that are funny. Well, of course, I may be telling you again after a while. Going from the troop ship from Africa over to Italy, it was a British ship, and of course they were hard hit. They didn't have much food. So for breakfast, we only had 2 meals a day, and for so many troops, I slept in a hammock across the table. They gave us fish, liver cheese, and tea. For supper, fish, liver cheese, tea. After about 2 days, when the fellow came in, England came in, I said, see, we know you don't have the food and everything, but can you give us water or a cocoa? Cocoa, the blooming queen don't get cocoa. So I mean, so that's one of the other things I can think of. Is see if something. I think that's about some of the things that I don't know. I try to put things down here, and I was hit, all that. I think I tore all the funny things on my head, airplane, and all that. I'll tell that later. All right. One day, of course, this was after we stopped the Germans from fighting us. They couldn't push us off the beachhead. One day about dusk, but here came 4 German bombers. They were practically on the ground. They were so close. They fly low so they get under the whatever the German Americans were using, you know, to take pictures of them coming in, so they knew they'd be under that screen. So they were going in to bomb Naples. Well, now, they started across up there. Every gun on that beach, including mine, and you must remember, it's 1,000 rifles, several thousand rifles, started shooting at, machine shooting at. We knocked 3 out of the sky, and the other one left smoking. And I was telling this to an Air Force one time, what do you mean you knocked it down with rifles? I said, well, you let several thousand rifles shoot at you and see how much damage they can do. It's just these things that they happen. In fact, we had one of our own fighters going down through what he thought was the German side, strafing us. Thank goodness he didn't hit many of us. So we were just busy all the time.
How did you stay in touch with your family?
Well, once in a while, we had pieces of paper and we could write it, and had an email, I guess what it would call it. We get paper and pencil, but I didn't get to write too many, but I did. I wrote to my mother, to my girlfriend, and wrote it. And of course, if you put something in there about what was going on or where you were, with the lieutenant or somebody read all the letters, they would erase anything that would identify where you are, what's going on. So I didn't get to write too often, but I did when I could.
What was the food like?
Well, what food? In the infantry, we had two kinds. We had what we called K-ration, C-ration. C-rations were 3 cans. One was pork and beans, one was hash, and I don't remember what the third was. That's for 3 meals a day. Then they had what they call K-ration. It was in a box about 2 inches high, 3 or 4 inches across, and 6 or 8 inches long. And inside of it, they had cans about the size of 2 Vienna sausages, and for breakfast that morning they had, believe it or not, eggs and bacon in that little can. They had a little fruit bar. They had a little coffee. That stuff you can make coffee. For lunch, we had that same size can with cheese and hardtack and maybe a cookie or two. And that night, I've forgotten what we had. It wasn't much, but it had all the energy, everything that you needed for your body. So I'll tell this too. I ate so many of those K-rations. I ate them more than I did the C-ration. And the first night I was in the hospital, they brought me a piece of steak. They brought me mashed potatoes and the other. My stomach was shrinking so I could only eat a third of it. I cried because that was rough that I couldn't eat it.
Did you have plenty of supplies?
At times. Now sometimes we didn't have anything to eat. They couldn't get to us. We might go 2 or 3 days without anything to eat and water. So we just had to wait till they could get to us. Or one time I told them I'll go back and get it. I went back and got the stuff that we needed. So plenty to eat, not really, but it was enough when we got it.
Did you feel any pressure or stress?
Well, of course you did the whole time because you didn't know what was going to happen. Like we used to say when the artillery shells were coming towards us, if we could hear it, we didn't worry about it. In fact, we could tell you if it's going to go to the left or to the right, but the one we worried about comes right towards you that you didn't hear, so you were always under that stress.
Was there anything special that you did for good luck?
Well, I guess for me, I had a lot of good luck. I had so many times I wouldn't be here now, as I mentioned 2 of them to you. But the Lord was with me, brought me through it, and you said, well, could you make friends? And then in 3 or 4 weeks, they wouldn't be there. So when you come out, when the war was over, you didn't have any friends that you could go see or call or anything. Because they were either back like I was, or not many of them, they'd been killed. So I'm one of the lucky ones.
How did people entertain themselves?
Well, I don't call it entertainment. You lay in a foxhole, and sometimes things were slacked, and of course we'd talk and make joke out of things, but as far as entertainment is concerned, I wouldn't say we could do much entertainment.
Were there any entertainers, any USO shows or anything
yes,
that you got
2
to
of
see?
them. When they withdrew us back to the line for the beachhead, I got to go, had to hike 2 miles to tell him. Joey Brown was there, and there's one boy, and I can't think of his name right now, but Joey Brown was great, and we were on the side of a sloping line. They had aircraft guns and everything around us, and there must have been 1,000 soldiers there while we were in the rest camp. But Joey Brown was something else. Still enjoyed it.
What did you do when you were on leave? Or did you get any leave?
I didn't get any leave. Not over there, I didn't. Now, we pulled back though to get more people. Like we didn't have many left, we had to come back and get new recruits like I was. And I know when I came back the first when the Germans tried to drive us off the beach, they tried for 5 days, didn't do it. When I drew back, I had a little beard. And of course we needed replacements. I said there's only 7 miles came back. And we got all these new replacements. I went to one of them and said, hey, do you happen to have a razor that I can use? So I went over to the side and put cold water in my helmet. Didn't have a mirror, and I shaved. When I went back to give him the razor, he looked at me and said, oh, you're young like us. I laughed about that.
Where did you travel while you were in the service?
Well, of course, we were in those 2 African places, Casablanca and the other one, and then the rest of it was in Italy. The rest of my duty was right there in Italy.
What did you think of your officers and fellow soldiers?
95% of the officers was great. Every once in a while you got one that we could have done a better job. But most of them were great.
Did you keep a personal diary?
No way. Because you're in a foxhole and ring and all that stuff, there's no way you could keep a diary on the front.
Do you recall the day your service ended?
Yeah, it was January. I'll have to say about the 6th, I guess it was. They discharged me. And so I went home and happened to be, I caught the quarter ride to college and I started back to college. And that was 1944.
Where were
45, I'm sorry, 45.
Where were you when you were discharged?
I was working in the finance office at Fort Belvoir, Georgia. I worked there 11 months after I got out of the hospital.
What did you do in the days and the weeks after you were discharged?
Well, I wasn't home but about 10 days until the college was coming back from Christmas holidays, so I went back, started back to college right there.
Was your education supported by the GI Bill?
It sure was. I couldn't have made it.
Did you make any close friendships while you were in the service?
Oh yes, made a lot of friendships. A lot of GIs, and GIs coming back all at once. Made a lot, and Margaret's my second wife. And I met my wife there. We got married at college, but she passed away with cancer at 39, and the Lord blessed me the second time.
Did you continue any of those friendships that you, relationships you made while in the service?
Well, not really, because they scattered all over the United States. So I can't say that I really did. I did one man for a while. He was a lawyer in Los Angeles, and we corresponded for a while. And then I went out to Los Angeles on a trip for 3 or 4 years after service, and called his office, and he wasn't in, so I missed getting to talk to him.
Did you join a veterans organization?
No, I guess I really didn't. I shouldn't have. I joined the Veterans of Foreign War for a while, but then I moved from one place to another. So I was a teacher, and I taught Virginia for 3 years, and then came to Atlanta. I've been here since '51.
Did your military experience influence your thinking about war or about the military in general?
Well, I'll have to say it did. It stuck with me for a long time.
Do you attend any veterans reunions?
No, I wish I could. Of course, as far as people that I know, most of them are gone. I mean, they didn't come back, so no, I didn't.
How did your service and experiences affect your life?
Well, we did what we wanted to do. I was so glad when I got back to the United States after seeing those countries torn up, villages blown up, all the people killed and all those type of things. It made you do a lot of thinking that we were over there, thank goodness, and the United States doesn't know what they missed. I pray that they never did.
Is there anything you'd like to add that we haven't covered in this interview?
Well, not really, other than just tell some of the things that about the soldiers, how we tried to keep the Germans going, keep them driving us out of there. A few things there that I might like to talk about. All right. Also, angio. Most of the people I'm sure hadn't heard about it, but it was something that they did because when we landed over there and landed in, if I might, I'm going to hold this up. It might not. Now this is it. Down on the bottom, it shows the arrows where we landed. Then next was Naples, and the line across there is the front line. Now, the British had one half of Italy, and we had the other half. We were on the east side, they were on the west side. Then they decided to do angio, which I'll tell you about. Of course, Rome's there. I just thought it might give you something to see what I'm talking about. So there we were. We were there. We landed, went to Naples, and they really gave Naples a rough time. And I didn't know it, but my brother was there in Naples after we went through. And the Germans, they set the mine traps and everything for you all through the buildings. And he walked out of the building at the post office. He worked at the post office. Dark street, and one of them set off one of those mines, tripped it, and it picked him up, sent him across the street, and he crawled under a truck on the way to see him because the whole side of the building fell in. So we pushed on above Naples and hit the front line, which I just showed clear across there. When they got up there, there were two mountain ranges that came right down through the middle of Italy, and a big valley between them, and of course the land on either side. Well, in November of that year, it rained the whole month. Of course, I was wet, my feet was wet. All right, in December, and I looked up, read a lot about it later on, they said that in December we had snow. And they say that that's the biggest snow that had in quite a few years. Here we were at the bottom of those mountains. The river froze over, the snow was deep. The Germans were on the mountain. They were, every time we tried to go up, they would drive us down. No motor vehicles could go up because they were so slick. And we had mules, and if we did get up, hike up the mountain or something, that would carry our ammunition and things like this. But we never could push them out. We just drive and try to go up, and we had about a third of our men had trench feet and had to go because their feet were frozen. I get that. Of course, I was getting it, didn't realize it, and my feet was all but freezing is what trench feet is, and it affects your nerves and everything in there. So finally, all of a sudden, they withdrew my outfit, and 8 or 10 other outfits, Marines and artillery and heavy things. We even had Rangers, 700 Rangers with us. We pulled back to Naples, and for about 3 weeks, we didn't know what was going on. So they fed us good, and then all of a sudden one day they gave us the hand grenades, and we put them on our outfits and the rifles. We got in a truck, went down to bay there at Naples, and they put us on these LST troop ships, and we traveled all night. And the next morning, I'll tell you a little bit about the angio in a few minutes. We had the angio beachhead. I went in the second wave of that, of the beachhead there. So we didn't know why they pulled us out and what they were doing, and what it was, because they could not push the Germans away from the line from the top of the mountain there. The British and the Americans got together and they said, we're going to have to do something because we cannot push them away. So I think it was the British said, well, why don't we have a beachhead above Naples, and we have this beachhead, and the Germans will pull back, what they're hoping to do away from there, and they would do it. So the trouble is they didn't have a lot of ships. Of course, I didn't know it, but D-Day, England was getting all the ships. The British person said, I'll get you some. So we got us these LST. And what they do, they went up and let the men out, come back to Naples and pick up another group. And I was in the second wave. So we went in, we surprised the Germans, and that night while they were having a big party, and we captured all the Germans, all officers, had a little fight. We captured 200 Germans, and there were not too many in that neighborhood. So they pushed out about 3 miles, and the general Custer, the general that we had there, I'm not going to mention his name, they told him that he was supposed to go and take those mountains, get on top of the mountain, put his tanks and his artillery up there. They couldn't take supplies down to the soldiers, and they were withdrawn back to the beach down there. So, but he said, no, I don't have enough troops. He said, I want to wait till I have more troops and everything. So he waited. We landed on January the 20th, 1944. So he waited 9 days until he got all kinds of artillery, tanks and everything. And he said, okay, I'm ready to make an attack. So on the 30th of January, he made an attack against the Germans. The only thing is, waiting those 9 days, it shook the Germans when the beachhead. So they, in Rome, they had all kinds of men in uniform. They took cooks, they took truck drivers, they took everything, gave them guns to get down there, and then they went back up in northern Italy and up in European countries and brought down a lot of divisions instead of bringing them back down below there. And so they built a big build-up. And of course, he said, well, on the 30th, he made a drive in, and all he could do was move in 9 miles. It was 20 miles to the mountains. But here he was, a half moon, just like a half of a moon, because you had the sea to your back, and you had a round moon, and we were 9 miles deep and 12 miles around the perimeter of that. So they decided all right, by that time the Germans had gotten all these troops in there. We had 100,000 troops, and they brought in 150,000. And they said, well, we're going to try to drive, we're going to try to drive them into the water. So the first drive was when I was talking about the barrel over my foxhole. That was the first big drive. They did push in about 3 miles. And what I didn't tell you earlier was we found out all the other troops were gone. Well, we knew we was back behind the German lines, so we said, well, we're going to have to get out of this somehow. So we made our way through the German line, got out in no man's land, and we were worried because each night you had a password like Alpha Pi, Babe Ruth. If they said Alpha and you didn't say Pi, you were gone. So we ran into a recruit, a man that just been put on was his first day in combat. He got lost in his outfit, so he's trying to find them, but instead of going about where they were, he was out in no man's land. He did know the password. 5 minutes later, we were challenged. So I got lucky there. So we got through there, and we got back to our lines, and of course I didn't know where my outfit was. As I said earlier, they'd all been wiped out with except a few of them. So I knew where the kitchen was, so we hiked it about 2 miles back to where our kitchen was, because we never did see the kitchen, but it was back there. And while we were, they fed us good, and about the time they got an order for all the cooks, all the truck drivers and everything, we needed the front, bring your rifle. So they got up 40 people. We went back to the front, and that night, while the lieutenant said, come on, they're going to put us 40 people over in a certain section. Just as we started across the field, there was an airplane up there in the sky, and it was German. We knew that. He was always dropping bombs, but usually they're the big ones. But this night he had, I call them personnel bombs, because when they drop them, it may be 100 or 200 yards that you're dropping. We all hit the ground, and as things settled, the lieutenant said, let's go, and that's when 7 of us got up and went out to the place where we were supposed to be. And here we were supposed to be a place where the 40 were supposed to be a whole company. So we just did what little we could do. We couldn't get the food to us and everything. I volunteered at night to go back and get it. I go back and get the food and water and bring it back. After about 5 days, they brought a whole company of men in there to take the spot where we were, 7 of them. So we came back, and then the Germans tried for 5 days to drive us in the sea. Well, what it is, they lost so many men, like some of their companies wouldn't have but 100, a battalion, whatever they call them, would have about 100, 200. They had 2 big battalions left. I'm saying battalion because I don't know what the Germans call them. So they said, this has got to be the drive. Well, the section we were on, it was British engineers, British troops, and the 45th Division. Then the rest of them were scattered all along the half moon shape. And they made this big drive that day. And of course, they put in the artillery, and they must have been a quarter of a mile from us. And they came in not just in one wave. There'd be one big wave of it, and it'd be in a few minutes here come another wave of it. They were just coming at us by the hundreds. And our artillery, they saved us because they were shooting into them, getting them. But they would get close to us, and we just, I'll use the word, we mowed them down. Finally, when you're in combat, you can be 100 yards, 200 yards, quarter of a mile from the front. But when they get close enough that you're throwing grenades, that's close. We ran out of grenades, so we fixed our bandits and we followed them. We stopped them. All right, there was a newspaper man from New York was there, and I read his article later on, and he said that when he got there, and he could try to walk, get right there at the air lines and the German, he said you couldn't walk without stepping on an American or a German for 100 yards. He said that's how many were killed. They lost, in the 5 days, they lost 19,000 men, and we lost about 20,000 men for those 5 days. Then the Germans decided, well, they could not drive us into the sea, so it's just a standstill. They were on the mountain, we were down there, and so from the month of March through May, we just have these little battles. We'd go out and we'd take a village, and they'd push us out. We'd take a thing, and they'd push us back. So it was just well, it shouldn't have been. If the general had done what he's supposed to be, we wouldn't be going through that. What we lost, they say for a small space that we had the hardest battles in the war, just for a small area. Some people say, well, that France and all that, but that was a big thing. But they said that we lost more troops there and fought harder than any other place during the war. So finally, about May, 1st of May, we got the order to push out. And because down there on the front line above Naples, they finally made a hole, got through the hole and started driving the Germans back. So we fought and we walked it about 25 miles from Rome. Pardon me. 25 miles from Rome, so we'd fight, and nighttime the engineers would go along, and because there's minefields everywhere, they'd get the mines out, and there's 2 white tape on either side of them. You didn't dare get over it, because we could do that at night. So finally, I know we'll forget till one night was gone, and here was a British soldier he stepped on the mine and blew both of his legs off. And he said, shoot me, shoot me. Well, we couldn't stop, but they knew that the medic was behind us. So we got to Rome, when you're on the mountain, you're looking over to Rome. That's when I said earlier that my feet started bothering me. And I said, I can't go anymore. So that's when they put me in an ambulance, took me back to Naples. And in the hospital there, when we got back, of course, went to Naples, spent a couple of weeks till the ship came up, hospital ship, as I said before, took us back to Naples. And as we're getting off the ship, they were carrying me off, I saw the sign, Second Base Post Office. I knew my brother was there. So they carried me on to the hospital. And of course, Army life, when you get in the hospital, they had somebody interview you, writing down all this stuff. He said, where are you from? I said, Irwin. I said, yes, I'm from Elizabeth, and that was 9 miles from my home. And he said, oh, we have a nurse here named Earlene. Said, do you know? I said, I sure do. A small town, I know everybody. I said, you tell her I'm here. And so the next morning, I heard somebody running up the hall, and she came to the door, and I said, good thing I'm a big pig, I'll be around your neck. And the other GIs in the ward, her mouth fell open, but there she was. All right. Also, I asked for a Red Cross person. She came, and I said, my brother's address is World Base, is Second Base Post Office, and I saw the signs. I got off the ship. 2 days later, here he came in. Now, how can you beat that? So I got to see him quite often. I got to be a walking patient. I got to walk around the hospital and all that. So stayed in the hospital there for about 2.5 months, I guess. And as I said before, that's when they put me on a ship, brought me to the United States, and I told you how I ended up at the Greenbrier. How's that?
Wonderful. I also noticed that you have you're wearing a uniform. Is that your original uniform?
That's my original uniform. My mother put it in a cedar chest. When she passed away, I got it brought it and put it in my cedar chest, and I'd almost forgotten, and I belonged to a club called World War II Round Table, and you do not have to have been just for World War II, you could be into Vietnam and all those. They formed an organization of about 200 people, and one day they had a celebration, and the school wanted us to come in and talk to the kids and so forth, and I had to think about my uniform. I went and got it. Believe it or not, I could put it on after 58 years. So, how we doing?
Real good. Would you mind standing up and we'll take a real good picture of you with this uniform on?
You want to break the camera, huh?
Oh, no, sir. I think this is wonderful. Is there anything else you'd like to add, sir?
Well, I believe I told you I got out of the hospital, got out, went to college, and I was going to be an architect. Junior year, my professor got a hold of me and said, "Fred, I think you ought to be a teacher." I said, "Who, me?" He said, "Yes." He said, "Why don't you go on, and then you can graduate. If you don't like it, come back another year and be an architect." Well, the day I graduated, I was offered a job at Oakland, Tennessee as a draftsman. But I went on, became a teacher, and I went through it for 35 years, so I guess it was what I was supposed to do.
I think that's wonderful, sir. Is there anything else you'd like to add?
Well, trying to think, I didn't even have to look at my notes. I did pretty well doing all that. See, one thing, let's see if I think I got everything on. People, you have to forgive me. I tried to memorize most of it, and I did. Well, I think I pretty well covered it. I could have put in this and that, but I think that pretty well tells you what I went through and how I'm lucky to be here. And when I made the speech at the round table, I said, "Hey, I'm here and I have both my feet. What more could I ask?"
Thank you, sir. We really appreciate your time, and the stories are wonderful. Now that we've kind of jogged your memory, I think you've come up with a couple other things you'd like to mention.
Yes, I sure have. While I was laying in the hospital there in Angio, of course, I was just there one night, and the next morning I heard all these airplanes. I said, "What's going on here?" So I rolled out of my bed, rolled under the lap of the tent, and looked up, and here was lines of B-25s, a little way behind was fighters. In a few minutes here come B-24s, back of the fighters. B-17s come by, the same thing. And they did that all day, and I didn't know it was D-Day up on Normandy Beach. And they would go back to Africa, South Africa, load up, did that all day long. And I just couldn't believe it. I didn't know what was going on. So I just it was something to see. Of course, I didn't know what was going on. What's the other thing? Oh, and this is one thing, you won't believe it when I tell you, but for 4 months on the front, I had on the same socks, I had on the same underwear, the same shirt, the same pants, and everything. And I told somebody that, and they said, "Well, do you stink?" I don't know. But I just thought I'd tell that thing. And I'm sure there's other GIs that spent more time than that. And I had a school here in Atlanta that 4th graders, and had a nephew, and he wanted to know if I'd come and talk to him about World War II. They'd been studying in the 4th grade. So I did. I went up and I had an American flag that I picked up off the battlefield, and I had my medals, and went to a friend that had a shovel, and took a lot of things up there to him and talked to him. And boy, they were great. But I had a question and answer period afterward. The little girl said, "Well, did you stink?" I said, "I don't know." "Well, did you brush your teeth?" "No." "Well, did you have a bag or something in your sleeping bag inside your box?" I said, "No." Now, you may think they're crazy questions, but not for them. They were just as sincere as they could be. But I had a ball. And the next day, my nephew's friends came up and said, "Hey, your Uncle Fred is cool."
That must have been a very, very rewarding
Oh,
experience.
it was, because the kids would just listen, their attention, and then I let them come back. I had a German helmet, I had an American World War II helmet, I had a German helmet, I had my helmet on the I let them come up and look at my medals, try on the helmets, the shovel where I dug the foxholes with, and they just had a ball. And then each one of them, 3 classes, wrote me a letter. 3/4 of them had a picture of a tank with a foxhole. They'd drawn it. And one of them was digging a foxhole. So, I mean, they made these pictures to thank me for it. And I mean, well, who else could have? I mean, they were so sincere. I enjoyed every minute of it. So I'm glad my wife reminded me of 2 things. I thought you might like to have it.
That had to be a very rewarding experience.
Oh, it was. I thoroughly enjoyed it.
Again, thank you so much. It's been definitely been my pleasure.
Well,
really
thank
appreciate
you for
taking the time.
Thank you
to
for
do
giving
this.
me the privilege.
Thank you, sir.